Good evening. Welcome to today's session. Today I'll be taking you through a basic concept in biology, specifically the cell. Now, by the end of today's lesson, you should be able to define a cell, state the two types of cells, and then give two characteristics of each of the types of cells. Now, to begin with, we would like to define a cell. A cell is defined as the basic structural and functional unit of life. It forms the basis of all life on Earth. Every living thing on Earth begins at the cell level. Now let's look at the types of cells. There are two main types of cells, namely the prokaryotic cells and the eukaryotic cells. Now the prokaryotic cells can also be called the bacterial group. Then the eukaryotic cells involve all other life forms, plants, animals, fungi, and then the protists or the protoctists. All these groups form the eukaryotic cells. So apart from the bacteria, all other forms of life can be classified as eukaryotic. Now let's look at the characteristics, the reason why eukaryotic is different from the prokaryotic. First, the prokaryotic cells do not have membrane-bound organelles. They don't have membrane-bound organelles. As in, it's only the cell. They do not have certain structures within the cell like the eukaryotic organisms. Secondly, the prokaryotic cells do not have a definite nucleus. So their nucleus is referred to as nucleoid. Their nucleus material is not surrounded by a nuclear membrane and therefore it is naked. That is a significant characteristic of prokaryotic cells. Then their cell wall is also made of peptidoglycan. Unlike the eukaryotic cells, when we get there, you know that the cell wall is made of different substance. So these are the characteristics of prokaryotic cells, among others. So if you are asked to state the characteristics of prokaryotic cells, one, you can say that they do not have membrane-bound organelles. Two, they lack a well-defined nucleus. And three, their cell walls are made of peptidoglycan. Now let's move on to the eukaryotic cells. Okay, so this is a typical diagram of a bacterial cell showing the parts. So we have the cytoplasm, the nucleoid, which I talked about. This is the genetic material. It is not surrounded by any nuclear membrane. It is naked, like I talked about. So we refer to this as nucleoid. Now, characteristics of eukaryotic cells. One, they possess membrane-bound organelles. So all the organelles are bounded by membrane. They have membranes surrounding their organelles. That is one characteristic of eukaryotic cells. Two, there is the presence of a well-defined nucleus. Unlike the prokaryotic cells, the eukaryotic cells have their nucleus surrounded by a nuclear membrane, which is a significant feature of eukaryotic cells. So protoctists, fungi, plants, and animals all have this feature that I've talked about. There's also the presence of mitochondria and chloroplast. Mitochondria is referred to as the powerhouse of the cell. It is responsible for cellular respiration, which provides eukaryotic cells with energy. They also have the chloroplast, which is responsible for photosynthesis, the manufacture of food, which all other organisms depend on. So this is a diagram showing a typical animal cell and a plant cell. So these are both eukaryotic cells, and this is the prokaryotic cell, the bacterial cell that I talked about. And from these diagrams, you can see that there are a lot of organelles in the eukaryotic cells than the prokaryotic cell. Organelles like endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondrion, the nucleus, the Golgi complex, all these are found in the eukaryotic cells. But when we look at the prokaryotic cells, they are missing. So these are some of the characteristics and differences that you can use to separate prokaryotic cells from the eukaryotic cells. So in summary, we've talked about a cell, and we said the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. And then there are two main types of cells, the prokaryotic cells and the eukaryotic cells. The prokaryotic cells mainly consist of the bacteria. The eukaryotic cells consist of all other life forms. Prototists, animals, plants, and the fungi are all eukaryotic cells. Then for the characteristics of prokaryotic cells, one, we said that they do not have well-defined nucleus, they lack membrane-bound organelles, and then their cell walls are made of peptidoglycan. Then eukaryotic cells, we realize that they have a well-defined nucleus, as in their nucleus are bounded by nuclear membrane. There's also the presence of mitochondria, chloroplast, and then well-defined nucleus. So these are the characteristics of both prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, and you've seen images for us to know what exactly we are talking about. So for your assignment, I would like you to define a cell and also state two main types of cell. Thank you, and meet you another time.